met with him. I saw the pictures of what it's from. Oh yeah. I never said you were in school.
We'll call the Selectmen's Meeting for May 13th, 2013 to order. First order of business is approved minutes from the previous meeting, April 25th, 2013.
I make the motion that we accept the minutes as read. No vote?
We'll wait just a minute. Is it open? No.
How many of the high schools in Northern County are accredited?
Accredited by New England Association. 2 of them.
That has nothing to do with how great you get, how much work to do that.
Aaron Wigness and WA.
We have a motion on the floor to accept the minutes of April 25th, 2013. I'll second the motion. Been moved and seconded to accept the minutes of April 25th, 2013 as printed. All those in favor? 3 in favor, none opposed. Warrants. Before the warrant, $187,019.71. Warrant of $60,222.41. Payroll warrant 426, 1354.78. 5/9 is $1,177.15. Balance after these warrants have been paid will be $124,265.37. We go from that on to old business, which is, we'll turn it over to Superintendent Ramsay to answer questions or whatever.
Yeah, I'm not used to being called old business, but I can go along with that.
You were mentioned a week ago.
I guess I more or less invited myself to the Selectmen's Meeting, and I've invited myself to all the town Selectmen's Meeting just because this time of year, it's budget season. I know we don't always communicate the best. I want citizens to know that I'm willing to come and talk and communicate about the school system in any way that they'd like. Make myself available actually anytime you wanted, if you wanted to do this annually, if you wanted to do it more often than once a year. I don't have any great dog and pony show or speech made up. I did bring a few copies of something I did for the school board a couple months ago, and I know there's not enough here to share with everybody, but if anyone was interested, I could get you copies and I'll pass those around. I took a 28-year look at the financial history in SCD 37. You might ask, well, why would you do 28 years? What's the significance there? The subsidy that we're supposed to get this year to run our schools on this coming year, 2013-14, from the state of Maine, is at the same level it was 28 years ago. That's why I picked 28 years. Our subsidy coming from the state of Maine this coming year is going to be $2,088,000. If you go back 28 years and see how much they sent us, it was about $2,088,000. We've been on a decline for a long, long time, and that's not news to anybody. Just dealing with town government. they're doing the same thing with to the towns. So, if you look at the first page with any kind of figures on it, if you're interested in looking at this at all, I did an analysis of subsidy. In 1986-87, we got $2,059,000, roughly the same as we're slated to get next year. We went through a period of growth where the state adequately funded education. I was curious to look at what did other stuff do in that same amount of time. Our valuation in this district went from 82 million to 605 million. That's a 7.5 time increase. Our local contribution, meaning what people had to pay in taxes across the whole district, went from 702,000 to 4,900,000 last year. So obviously, you can quickly see there's been a great shift from the state paying for education to the local taxpayer paying for education. Although, to be fair, our enrollment did drop from 1,004 kids down to 729, so our populations, our school populations have shrunk. But our budgets, and the reason I did this is I wanted to be able to show citizens that, I mean, our budget, and I'm going to say only, but please understand, I understand that this is a lot of money, but it only doubled in 28 years. Valuation, remember, went up 7.5 times. The shift went from the state paying less to us paying a lot more, and our budget basically has doubled in that amount of time. So I wanted to look at, well, what did salaries do in that same amount of time? And really the only salaries I had to compare that I know I'm comparing apples to apples is teacher salaries. I mean, we can't really go out and look in the workforce and do a real comparison, but we did teacher salaries, and I also did cost of living, or basically consumer price index. Consumer price index started in 1982 with a base year of 100, and they add to it every year. So when you look at all that information, and not to spend too much time on it, each one of them is graphed, and you look at subsidy, it shows it going up and then bring back down again. I mean, our loss of students is a steady, slow decline, but the best one really to look at is you want to flip all the way to the very end, and it graphs them all on the same piece of paper. And what it shows is every indicator of growth, meaning salary increase, budget increase, all those, grew at a nice, steady, constant slope. Even our budget grew. I mean, they all were relative to each other. As cost of inflation, CPI increased, budget increased the same rate, workers' wages increased the same rate. But what surely did not follow that nice gradual pattern was valuation. Valuation followed it until this magic year in magic year 21, which was about right here, and then it took an extreme spike. Most of it, there's nothing we can do about it, but most of us that's in the field feel that that was the state's way of shifting the cost. I mean, the state artificially put up all of these towns' valuations, knowing what it would do to all their commitments. What it would do was make their commitment decrease and make local commitment increase. I did this to want to fairly show, because it does truly fairly show, that our budget woes, our real burden, is not the fault of our budgets growing astronomically, even though we could all argue. I mean, people have opinions about school budgets. You could say they're too much or too little, but it's been a nice, steady, gradual growth. It's not because of the wages that the teachers are making or being too much, although we could all have opinions on that as well, but they've taken a nice, steady growth that goes along with consumer price index. It's because the shift has gone to the taxpayer. And when the shift goes to the taxpayer, we all feel it. We as taxpayers feel that shift, and it hurts. I know of people's taxes that have doubled, tripled, quadrupled. If you go by just this simple graph, the burden's gone up 7.5 times. And all that's written in there. I don't need to go into that detail, but I wanted to share that tonight as my segue into just sharing what our budget's going to be like this year. Our budget this year is going to be tough. I realize it's gonna be tough. I've built it. I realize it's gonna be a stretch to ask people to support it. I hope people will. But I wanna give you a little background as to why it's gonna be hard. Again, the state has reduced our subsidy by $219,000 over what it was last year. So right out of the gate, you're $219,000 behind. They're asking us to raise about another 200 and something thousand to get that figure of 219,000 less. So now you're looking at a $400,000 swing before you ever start doing anything. Blue Cross Blue Shield insurance went up 13%. Why did it go up 13%? Because they're ramping up for Obamacare to go into effect, and the insurance companies are all protecting themselves. Right, wrong, or indifferent, we don't have any say in it, but the average increase in insurance for single subscriber was $900 per person. $900 a person times 150 some odd employees is a considerable increase to your budget. The governor's talking about, and it's still in the budget at this time, that the districts have to pay the state share of main state retirement. That's again shifting something that the state used to pay for to the local share. That in our district's $103,000. So what I'm faced with doing, and we've done it now for a number of years, is I'm actually cutting the budget while it's still going up. And I wanted to express that to people. It doesn't even make sense to say that, but I'm cutting stuff out of the budget to offset these huge increases to the taxpayer. Our budget was at its highest in 08-09, and it shows it in those graphs. We had an $8,568,000 budget in 08-09. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 budgets ago. Our budget last year was $7.8 million, almost $800,000 less than our highest budget. Our budget this coming year will probably be a couple $100,000 more than last year's, but it's still going to be significantly below the highest years we had back in the 08, 09, 09, 10 budget years. So it's not that the district has really gone crazy with spending, it's a shift to the local, and I don't know what to do about it, other than scream to high heaven every chance you get to the state, try to get some legislation in to change the funding formulas, have people realize that it's in the state of Maine Constitution to provide a free and appropriate education to all its students, and the state is supposed to pay for a big portion of that. But
Is this same scenario happening everywhere?
no. The state would tell you. The other thing is it's really hard to cipher through all the bull, excuse my language, that you read. The state would tell you that they're spending more for education than they ever have. And that is true. Their total education budget is more this coming year than it was last year, and it was more last year than the year before. What they're not telling you is they're siphoning off the first $100 million or so off the top for special projects. So the amount that's going into general purpose aid, or what we call the amount going into EPS funding, is getting less every year. For instance, you've probably heard about them funding charter schools. Okay, they're siphoning off money to fund charter schools. None of that goes to any of our local public schools. You probably heard about the Oxford Casino Fund that was supposed to go directly into education. They're siphoning that off to pay for some pet education projects, but they're not public school projects. So when you look at that total amount that's going to true public schools, it's been getting less and less and less. The agenda is quite clear. The agenda is to provide charter schools and private schools and school choice in the state of Maine. Regardless how you feel about that politically, that puts less money into your public schools. And we are getting less money. And then to piggyback on your question, then when you look at where the money goes, the shift is urban. The new system has been designed to reward school systems with the most kids. The more kids you have, the bigger the school you have, the more money you're gonna get per kid. So the more rural you are, the smaller you are, the less you get. And it used to be just the opposite. When I took my first finance course, I think in the early 90s, to become a principal, they used to use the example of how it's the state's obligation to fund schools like Lubec, Maine. Lubec was always a high school they used as an example, because Lubec was one of the most expensive high schools to run in the state because of geographically where it was and its isolation. They always used to use the island schools as an example. I mean, you have to educate those kids. Now they don't want to talk about that. And you know what happened to Lubec High School. Lubec High School closed. You know what's happened to this school. It closed. And schools all around the state have closed due to this funding crunch. What I would like to ask people to do is, I don't want you to be foolish and support the budget no matter what. I mean, I don't expect that. I don't expect you to support the budget if you've got questions about it and disagree with it. But I would like you to realize that the increases you're going to see this year are due to the state reducing its funding and not due to the district expanding programming or any of that. We're going to look at a budget Wednesday night that I really can't share with you yet because it hasn't been seen by the school board, but it only has a 1.9% increase in it. I say only. You might say, well, why is there any increase? Okay, you put, you know, but that 1.9% increase has cuts in it. Things that we did last year, we're not going to do anymore because the increases that I already mentioned to you add up to 4.9% if we did nothing else different. If we hadn't cut anything at all, if we hadn't reduced any things, and I put in the 13% for insurance, and I put in the increase in Maine State retirement, and I put in the negotiated increases that's already in the budget, it's a 4.9% increase, which is the last budget that the school board saw. Second draft, 4/3/13. My foot to the back.
For Columbia Falls and Columbia, isn't there a third major thing?
That's the next thing I'm going to talk about. So that budget had a 4.88% increase to everybody district-wide. I mean, that's how much the budget went up. But you no longer, it's not as simple as just talking about what the budget is, because with this funding changes and what valuation does, and the fact that they've reduced subsidy, what everybody really cares about is what's it going to do to your town assessment. So this budget, 4.88% increase, that isn't the budget we're going forward with Wednesday night. It's going to be less than that. But if we had gone forward with this, the town of Columbia Falls would be looking at a 25.42% increase in assessment. I mean, that's huge. That's due to three things. It's due to the reduction in subsidy from the state. It's due to an increase in valuation of the town of Columbia Falls by 2.25% increase, which is one of the few towns in our district that actually had an increase this year. And that kind of, I think the state has planned, they just rotate it around. I honestly do. One year it's Columbia Falls, next year it's Hammond, next year it's, you know. But anyway, it's 2 point, and then the third thing is that last year, Cherryfield paid $370,000 additional assessment to keep their school open out of the budget. That amount of money would have been shared by all the rest of the towns if they hadn't done that. So that amount, people are going to look at this increase in assessment and not realize that last year's would have been higher anyway if Cherryfield hadn't chosen to pay that.
Ours was actually reduced because Cherryfield paid extra.
Yours was last year, yes. So this year you're going to have to pay. Let's assume most of you probably know there's a vote tomorrow night in Cherryfield to withdraw or not withdraw. I'm talking right now as if they stay in the district. If they stay in the district, that reduction you got last year is going to go back in, and then on top of it, there's an increase. So if this budget stayed at 4.9%, you'd have a 25% increase. I can tell you the budget I'm taking forward, which the board hasn't seen yet, so I can't really share it with you. The increase is going to be significantly less than that. But it's still going to be much higher than I'll ever see anyone. You know, it's...
But if the state controls the pencils, they can write it any way they want. I mean, they control all the factors that affect us.
Yes. And like I said, I don't know what to do about it other than keep complaining, but when you're one voice, they are very good at, and I do this every time I go to Augusta, but they're very good at saying, yes, I hear you, you are right, you are right, you're right. We need to get some legislation to change it. We really do. I feel the pain of your coastal communities, and then you go away, and nothing changes. And then the next time you go, you say the same thing, and they say the same thing, and they go, they don't disagree with you. And there's legislation pending right now that's going to be resolved in the next 4 or 5 weeks to make it even worse. Not for this coming year, but for future years. I mean, they have legislation in to make local school districts pay the transportation, tuition, and room and board for any school that a kid wants to go to in the state of Maine. And that's got some legs. I mean, I don't think it will pass, but there's people really interested in seeing that. There's legislation in place right now to make the local high schools pay the tuition costs for any remediation course a student has to take when they go to college. So, I mean, on the face of it, that sounds good, but what they don't realize is we have kids, special needs kids, that we love to see go to college. We want them to go on to school. But we know before they ever go that they're going to have to take some catch-up work. They'd have to, no matter where they went to school. It's not fair to say that it's the high school's fault that they didn't, and we'd have to pay those bills. It's just a total shift to try to get the local to pay for everything. And the whole idea behind shared costs, the reason why we have government in the first place, is to do things collectively that we can't do as individuals. I'm not for big government. I'm a pretty conservative person, but I understand that I cannot defend the United States of America from the Ridge Road. We need to have an army. I understand that. I also understand that that Addison can't build roads that go to Bangor, and we have to have a collective system for that. And we have to have a collective system for education. We cannot educate our kids in these small communities and give them what they need effectively without having help from the state government and subsidy, especially as our enrollment shrinks. Grace?
So you mentioned Cherryfield and vote tomorrow night.
Yes.
Have you done your budget both ways?
Yes, I have.
Thinking ahead, I figured you might have.
Yeah, and I actually have it with me tonight in case I needed to refer to it, but I really can't share it because...
No. But you're talking about our...
But it's going to go up even more. I mean, I'll be honest with you that
yeah.
if Cherryfield, if they successfully withdraw, this is also something that's hard to explain because for years the district has said, if a school closes, your budget will go down.
Yeah. Right. That's what they told us
Right.
here.
And that's true.
But they told us that here, too.
Well, it's also true here. I mean, I can show you right here tonight where it's true. But but your taxes didn't go down.
No.
Because while that was happening, and the only reason it happened, let's be honest about it, this school never would have closed if the state had been paying what it should have been paying. It never would have. There wouldn't have been the money crunch in the district to get people thinking about, geez, we got to do something. But what happened is when your school closed, at the same time, I mean, it's right in those same years that the state is sending you less and less and less money. And the same thing with Cherryfield. Cherryfield, if they withdraw, and it's different with Cherryfield because they're not closing. If Cherryfield closed and we still kept the kids in the district, that's a different scenario than them closing and we don't get the kids. They keep their kids and they get the money for them, the subsidy. But even still, with Cherryfield closing, our budget will be almost $900,000 less without them. But we're going to lose 700 and something thousand in subsidy and another 700 and something thousand in taxes that they paid. So we're going to lose 1.4 million right off the top with them withdrawing. Some of that we'll get back because they're going to tuition their kids to Narraguegas, and there's 40 some odd kids that will be tuitioned back at $7,000 something a piece. Quick math, I mean, we can come up with about 400,000 there pretty quickly. We're going to share some services. They're going to, not to go in great detail, but they got some high-need special ed kids that we're still gonna service outside of their school, and they gotta pay the real cost of those. So we recoup some of that cost, but not enough so that if I take both budgets, budget with Cherryfield, budget without Cherryfield, the budget without Cherryfield is a lot less in budget. Like I said, it's actually almost $900,000 pulled out of it for Cherryfield. It's only about 600 and something thousand less because you've got to add in those other increases I talked to you about. But it's still significantly less, and it's the amount less that I predicted to people. People said, oh, how much money would you save by not having the school? Oh, 600 and something thousand. I mean, it's been said several times, and that's exactly what it came out to be. But even then, your taxation goes up.
But you also
Because
predicted
you
it
got
would be
less-
over $1 million if Churchill pulled out.
Yep.
You predicted that back when they took the second vote, not
Yeah.
February.
Yeah, and the perfect storm almost happened in that case for them and for us. They happened to be a town that their valuation, yours went up, theirs went down. So by theirs going down, it meant the subsidy went up. So they went from being about a $600,000 receiver to a $740,000 receiver in 1 year. So it really helped them and hurt the district.
And if,
What's left of the district.
am I correct? If they do withdraw, their taxes are going down this year.
Well, yes, but that's misleading because, I mean, in all fairness, and I didn't speak up at the public meeting because it wasn't my place, but their taxes are going to go down anyway. Their taxes are going to go down the same amount whether they stay with us or leave us because they paid 300 and something thousand extra last year, and they don't have to pay that anymore. So their taxes, I mean, I could show it to you if I was to show it tonight, but their taxes basically, their assessment's going to be about the same with us or without us. They're basically going to raise their foundation allocation, which the state tells you what that is. If you don't raise this amount, you're not going to get this amount in subsidy. Their planned budget, which I've seen and actually helped them through, you know, give them the stuff to create it, their planned budget is exactly that foundation allocation. That's what it would be without us, that's what it would be with us. So yes, it's correct to say they're going to pay less taxes by withdrawing, and that sounds like a great caveat for the withdrawal people, but they would pay the same amount of less taxes if they stayed.
But they'll only do that for 1 year, I would suspect.
I think there's going to have some increases, yes. And there are some also 1-year payments to us, though, that are going to go away after the first year, so it's going to be a bigger burden for us in year 2 than in this first year. Not a lot bigger, but bigger. And that's really all I had. I know you got a lot on the agenda, and I'd be willing to answer any questions anybody
So that
might have.
1.2 million, if they pull out, we're going to be responsible for, what, 25% of that?
Well, because I've reduced some other stuff that I can do because they're not, well, for instance, just quickly, we was going to buy a bus for $93,000. With one less town and one and a half less bus runs, I'm going to recommend to the school board that we don't buy that bus in this year. So that's a $93,000 reduction in the budget, and it's easily done without having ones. Now, if we keep that, if they vote and stay open, the bus we're going to buy is a handicap bus. The student it's needed for is a Cherryfield student, so it's kind of easy to see if they stay with us, we really need to buy the bus. If they don't stay with us, then they really need to buy a bus, and we really don't need it. So there's a few things like that we can do with them pulling out that will help close that gap some, Sally. But
What did we save by shutting the school down?
about the same. But
I mean, we're saving money by doing this every year. We're saving money by having this school closed.
we as a district are.
We are.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we are.
What are we saving as a taxpayer? Like, what would I save? Say, what have I saved by shutting the school down?
I mean, I could show you where you saved.
$50 did I save? I mean, is it as foolish as that?
I have no idea.
No.
I mean, I could show you where as a town what you saved. It's impossible for me to show you as a taxpayer, and I explained that at one of the church meetings, because all the district has any say in is what they assess the town.
I mean, I just would
Then
like to
the
know
town is
the-
responsible.
like the real amount that I, as just an individual,
Right.
saved by this school shutting down.
Well, I mean, it's impossible for me to tell you that, because the district doesn't assess taxes. All the district assesses is the assessment to the town. Like, for instance, on this sheet right here, this is not the real budget that's gonna necessarily go through, but I can look on here for total assessment to Columbia Falls for 2013-14, $335,000. That's all the district does. They turn that over to the town, then the town puts it in their budget as to what their total commitment is for everything that they do. I mean, the town has other obligations.
Where do I find that answer? Where do I get that answer as to, from my local
You'd have to go to the local assessor. and they-
assessors, and they tell me what I saved by the school
They
being
can't
shut
tell you
down?
either.
Well, the town could tell you, I mean, the town can tell you what you pay for a mill rate, for mills, right? What you pay on $1,000 worth of value. And if you look at how much the budget has been reduced by closing the school, which is a pretty fair estimate to say that the district is spending between $600,000 and $800,000 less a year than if this town was open, if this school was open. Now, can you show that in budgets? No, because like I said, every time we did something, the state reduced a subsidy, which made us increase taxation to everybody. So you can't really show a budget that shows that there's an $800,000 savings. But all I can tell you, and you really only have my word to believe it or not, is if we opened the school up, boom, tomorrow, our budget would grow by about $800,000 to do that.
I think that the truth of the matter would be that it hurt the kids in this district by closing our schools. We have overcrowding situations in Harrington and what was the other school? That wasn't Edison, I think.
Well, I mean, that's, again, totally up to anyone's opinion. I mean,
It is, it's tough to see when you go
It's tough to
to
see.
Millbridge and they got 8 kids on the team and you're sitting there with 23.
Right.
I mean, and it's that same, and you watch half the kids doing the cheers the cheerleaders are doing.
Right. It's
And
tough.
if that's happening in the classroom, which, you know, can't see, my kids' grades don't reflect it, but if that was, then I would think we've lost something. We haven't gained anything.
We've lost a lot of classroom space, that's for sure.
Well, again, it's opinion, and I'm not faulting anyone's opinion. Prior to the school closing, my opinion would have been, now you gotta understand that I was biased back then. I mean, I was a Harrington principal for 17 years. I watched a good many years go by where I had 20-some odd on the bench of the teams that I had, and this school had 8, 9 kids on the entire team. So those kids that grew up that way had a tremendous benefit. So if you've lost something, absolutely.
Yeah.
But did you lose a benefit that was necessarily fair in the first place? I mean, I don't know. Now we could get in, you know, we could duke it out back about it.
Wasn't there a
I mean, I don't know if
plan?
it was or it wasn't, but
What's the plan? I mean, are we headed in a direction? I thought it was to build a middle school somewhere,
that is the plan.
and that is still the plan?
That is still the plan, but it's such a distant plan. I mean, I want to be honest with you. The state has denied that plan. The state put us on a list
I mean,
that
it'd
is
just be
so
a shame
long
for
that
this to continue and go on.
I don't believe
for-
we'll see it.
Seems though it'd be a shame for this to continue and go on for here again, and we watch stuff go on 10, 15, 20 years and nothing changes, that we've lost our school for absolutely no reason. We've committed a wrong, and maybe we should try to reverse that and get our school back.
I mean, you could try that. I don't think that that's going to be
It just comes on,
palatable.
Cherryfield was slotted to shut down, and now all of a sudden they don't have to shut down. They can join the district again, and we're all set, and we're gonna pay for it anyway. Just 'cause they decided to stick to something and keep the school open.
Well, that's up to your school board.
Yeah.
I mean, they haven't voted to close it again. I don't believe they would, because one thing I didn't mention in this report is for the first year, we're seeing growth in the district in terms of students. We're 1% larger than we was a year ago. That doesn't sound like much, but it's the first increase in student population in over a decade. We've been on a really steady downward slope, and we now have next year's kindergarten, this year's kindergarten and first grade are really large right across the district. So it's an uptrend, or or maybe it's just a blip. I mean, it's hard to say yet whether it's an abnormality or that trend will continue. But
Just seems though that, you
positive
know,
look.
that this town has lost the draw right off the bat here for, say, a family to move to Columbia Falls. We throw that right out. Now we're not drawing people come here, they'll go to Harrington, they go to Addison, a new family would come. We don't have a school, so
Well, if they
I
come
don't know.
here or there, they're still, the way it presently is, they're gonna go to one of those schools. So,
right, but as far as our town goes, we're not trying to promote any growth here now. We've gone stagnant by shutting this down. And it seems like we turned into more of a retirement community than we are a town. Sorry.
well, I think that's true of all our towns, regrettably.
The thing that I dislike the most is that research shows that children learn the most from birth to the age of 5. Every school around us, every system around us has a preschool program, and they're taking advantage of the knowledge that these kids can learn so much, so fast. We don't have any space to put a program like this. It would bring in more subsidy for us. We can't do anything about it. So many people here, you'd be surprised how many people are taking their preschoolers to Jonesport, Beals, or Jonesboro, and those towns reap the benefit.
They're only reaping the, that's true, but they're only reaping the benefit because they're taking them there illegally. I mean, just so you know.
Illegally?
Illegally,
They're supposed to have a superintendent's agreement?
yes. And Jonesport, Jonesboro, and Beals are taking them illegally because they know that they're residents of this district, and they're taking them and collecting the subsidy money on them. I mean, I haven't said anything about it because, I mean, I'm pretty pro-kid. If a kid can get a preschool education that's helping them, then I'm not going to be the fly in the ointment. But they're really supposed to get an agreement to be able to do that because it's really stealing another district's kid. But where we don't have the program, I'm not about to call someone up and say they can't take their 4-year-old to preschool.
Do they use that subsidy for child as the other elementary?
If they meet the criteria, they do. The criteria is less than a full day's program. But they have certain rules they have to meet, and they have to have a certified teacher and all that. If they do meet all that, they get full subsidy. But you got to remember that full subsidy isn't anything anymore. Full subsidy for us is about $1,800 a kid, and it used to be about $6,000. So when we talk about, it used to be, if a superintendent, you want to do agreement, you'd say, oh, don't worry about it, we'll just swap count. Well, swap count used to mean you'd get about the same as you would if they paid tuition. Swapping count means now, don't agree to that. You know, you're going to get $1,800 if they have to pay tuition at $7,000. So we don't, do that as nicely as we once did because let me give you an example, and this is, I understand what you're talking about, where you're coming from, I really do, but I'm obligated to look at all the towns as well. We'll use Millbridge as an example. Millbridge is an 82% free and reduced lunch school. It's the highest in the district. What that means is, and we could argue that maybe some of it's not right and there may be some cheating and lying here and there, but basically Millbridge, like all our schools, have quite a lot of poverty in them. All our schools are 60% above. I think the lowest is 66%. Millbridge is 82%. Millbridge as a town receives 4% funding from the state. It is in the lowest receiving category you can be in. Now, if you think about the people that live there, forget about the shore property for a minute, but just think about the town and the people that live in it and the families that you know. Are any of these towns really that much richer or poorer than any of the other ones? Cherryfield, being its neighbor, but having no shore property, is a 52% receiver. The state funds their education of their kids at 52%. The local taxpayers only have to pay 48%. If you live in Millbridge, you've got to pay 96% of your bill, and the state pays 4%. Because of the valuation of the coastal property. And Addison and Harrington fall somewhere in between those two extremes, and Columbia Falls fall somewhere in between there. But what's broken, I don't disagree with anything you've said and all that, but what's broken is the system of funding education. Because I go back to my original statement, if they had never changed that and they're funding it the way they should, this school would have never closed. There'd never been talk about closing Cherryfield. We would have kept going the way we was going, because in those years, subsidy was growing along with tax. I'm not saying we didn't pay plenty of taxes, and taxes are like anything else. We'll complain about them no matter what they are, right? I mean, when they were low, we complained about them. But relatively speaking, they were much less than they are now in the comparative bill that we're paying. So we're paying a much bigger piece of that, and so therefore, it gets people anxious.
And we have less and less to say, even though we're paying more.
We have less and less to say.
Now, the state is supposed to pay, what, 55% of education?
Yeah, they're paying about 46% or something like that. And they would tell you, and even that amount is fictitious, because I told you how they're siphoning off the top. The amount that actually comes to public schools is even less than that.
I have a question, getting back to your statement earlier, that the trend is to private schools, charter schools. Yes. I've been hearing about that for, 2 or 3 years. What's brought that to the forefront?
Well, part of it is our governor. I mean, that is part of his agenda is charter schools. And, part of it is a national trend. Charter schools, though, the thing is by definition, they mean different things in different places. You take Florida, for example. They keep wanting to bring up Florida to us in the state of Maine as we ought to follow their example. I'd be all for following their example. In Florida, the state gives X amount of dollars subsidy per student to every student in the state, no matter where you live, no matter what your socioeconomic background, no matter what the town's wealth or poverty is. I don't know what the figure is, but I'll say $6,000. $6,000 follows every student. If they did that in Maine, I'd be all for it. We'd get the same rate for our kids here as they get in Cape Elizabeth, or the one that my favorite example now to talk about is Hammond Academy. I just told you about Millbridge being 82% free and reduced lunch, and they get 4% subsidy. Hampton Academy, brand new this year, it's a $65 million building. If you haven't been to it, you ought to go to it just to see where your money's being spent. Because there's a 4-lane highway that dead ends at Hampton Academy. They actually have a special off-ramp off 395 to go to Hampton Academy. And if you haven't been there, I'm serious. It's 4-lane highways, 2 lanes in, 2 lanes out. Hampton Academy is SAD 22. It's outside of Bangor. It's a greater Bangor area. Ride the roads around Hampton Academy. Just go a mile either direction, and all you see is great big 3-story white columned buildings built on big old farm steads. It's just huge, wonderful, I imagine, doctor, lawyer houses. They're a 70% receiver, SAD 22. The state of Maine is paying for 70% of that $65 million building. And if we built a building here tomorrow, if they'd allow us, they'd pay 28% of ours as a district. And actually less than that if Cherryfield withdraws, because when Cherryfield withdraws and takes that 52% with them, our 28% is going to go down to about 15%.
So building a school in this district is out of the question for the foreseeable future.
First of all, they put us so low on the list. We did an application last year. We went through the process and hoped, because to me that is our own, I mean that is our salvation, to solve everybody's issues. Build one facility. Everybody loses a school and everyone gains a school all at the same time. They gain a wonderful new state-of-the-art facility, and all the old schools are gone. To me, that's the solution. To build that, we would have to build it without any state funding. And you're probably looking at, even a facility for us, $25 to $35 million, totally funded by local, because the state has put us so far down on the list. It'd be a decade at best before we're approved, and even then, who knows what priorities would change within the state and who would go jump ahead. But in the meantime, like I said, they built a $65 million Hampton Academy, and are paying for more than two-thirds of that cost.
So what they're telling you is you should move to Hammond Academy, or Hammond.
Yes. So to get back to Bun's question, in the legislature right now, and you guys all have a local representative right down the road. In the legislature right now, these are some of the bills that's pending, and they all have traction. One is to give parochial schools and private academies the same EPS funding as public schools. If that happens, you know what will happen if that happens. There's 100 schools in the state that will all of a sudden get funding, and the funding isn't going to increase. So it's just going to siphon off from us. That's one of the bills in front of the legislature right now. Another one is for us to pay the remedial costs of college things like I talked about. Another one is that if you have a failing school 2 years in a row, now it's funny that a week ago when the list of grades came out, the governor and the commissioner both said there's no hidden agenda here. We just want people to have dialogue about their schools. We want them to know whether their school's an A, a B, a C, or a D, or an F. There's no hidden agenda. Within 4 days, they introduced legislation that if you get an F 2 years in a row, kids can go anywhere they want to, and the home district has to pay the bill. Not just the tuition, transportation, and room and board if it's so far away they have to stay.
So if I had a kid that wanted to go to Hampton Academy, he'd stay up there.
That's right. We'd have to, SAD 37 would have to pay. Now presently the way the rule is, you'd have to pay. I mean, if you've got a kid that you want to send to Hampton Academy and it's your choice, you've got every right to do that. You send them, you pay the tuition. But under the new law, if it passes, and we're hoping it won't, but it's got interest. People are interested in it. We'd have to pay, we as a district would have to pay a bill. Now presently, that is true right now with charter schools. If you've got any kid in your district that wants to go to a charter school, doesn't matter where it is, and they get accepted to go, SAD 37 has to pay the bill. And we are presently paying the bill for kids going to charter school.
Where's the nearest charter school?
Goodwill Hinckley. And the new legislation, presently all we have to pay is tuition, but under the new legislation we'd have to pay transportation and also room and board because that individual's living there. I mean, and Goodwill Hinckley's far enough away you'd have to live there.
And who sets the price, using Goodwill Hinckley,
Yeah.
who sets the price to what you're going to pay for board and that? Them?
Yeah, yeah. The state sets the tuition rate, but this is interesting, it's been a law for years. Tuition rate at a private school or a charter school is higher than in a public school.
Why?
Because it costs more. Because they would tell you that their costs are higher because they have more to offer. So the state put a law through quite a few years ago that allowed them to charge 10% more for tuition. It's not a lot more, but if you send a kid right now to, say, WA, which is a private academy, and you're going to pay the tuition, or the district pays the tuition, it's 10% higher than the state-approved tuition. They add a 10% premium to it.
And at that time, they didn't have to be certified teachers.
No.
At those academies.
They do now if they
Yeah, they
receive
do.
any state funding. So, no one asked the question, but we were graded in this district. We have 4 elementary schools and a high school. We received about every grade you could have except a D. We had an A, a B, 2 Cs, and an F. The F was our high school. There's 10 high schools in the state of Maine that received Fs. Almost every one of them were rural, high free and reduced lunch, isolated maybe is not the right term, but schools. Quite a few of them were in Washington County. They got the Fs.
So economics played a part.
Economics played a part. You probably read those editorials. They're directly linked to the economics. But what also played a part isn't so much economics as it is the need and the desire to take the SAT. The high school score is 40% based on this year's SAT, 40% based on the 3-year average SAT, and 20% based on your graduation rate. Our graduation rate was fine. We lost no points for that. We have a great graduation
Does
rate.
everybody know what the SAT is?
So SAT is the college aptitude test. So, you know, I mean, just think about that. If you're a kid going to school in Cape Elizabeth and your parents and everyone you know makes a living from a job that they got because they're a college graduate. Say that's that kid. Or you're a kid going to Narraguagas High School. And your parents, some of them are college educated, but a lot of them are not. A lot of them are very good, hard-working people that make their living doing something other than a job that they went to college for. Which group of kids do you think probably has the highest aspiration to do well on the test? I mean, probably the kids that everyone they know works in a job that they had to go to college for. The other kids, quite a few of them, a high percentage of them, very high percentage of them, are mad that they're taking the test on a Saturday, because in the state's infinite wisdom, you have to go Saturday morning to take the test. It ain't even Monday through Friday, which would make sense. Saturday morning. They're mad that their parents have made them go there. They know, in some cases, they know they're not going to use the test for anything. They've already got their lobster boat all bought with their 800 traps. And they're already a damn good fisherman making a lot of money. So why do they want to try on that test? So it isn't a measurement of how bright the kids are, how well they're educated. It comes down to a measurement of, does this test have any meaning to me or not? And if it doesn't have any meaning to them, they're not going to do very well on it. So most of the schools that represent populations like that don't score so well. Now that doesn't mean that our school does not have kids that do very, very well on the SAT. We do. It's just that our average SAT score isn't that high. And then when your two measurements is this year's score and your 3-year average, well, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out if you bomb it this year, there's 40% gone. Well, what's it done to the other 40% when you bombed it in this year? Well, knock that down. So 80% of your grade is low. So our high school got an F. The biggest irony of all, I have the list of every school here in the state if anyone wants to look at it, but the biggest irony of all is Woodland High School. Woodland Junior Senior High School is a 7 through 12 school now. Woodland always used to be 9, 12, but they've done the same thing as happened here. They've tried. So they've become a...
Woodland or Baileyville? Is it Woodland here or is it Woodland?
It's both. It's Baileyville, but it's Woodland here.
Isn't there a Woodland in Worcester County?
Yes, but Woodland, Baileyville, down near Callis, with the pulp mill.
Yeah, with all the money.
Right, is a 7 through 12 school. They don't do it like we talked about maybe a year or so ago. We talked about moving 7th and 8th grade to high school, and we'd move our 7th and 8th grade teachers with them. I mean, they really downsized, and they're doing 7, 12 with their existing high school teachers. So they have the exact same teachers, teaching all grades. The same school, the same everything. Their 7th and 8th grade got an A ranking. The 9, 12 got an F. So the same building, same teachers, same everything. The state, in its infinite wisdom, didn't know how to score those 7, 12 schools, so they said, we got to give them 2 grades. We got to give them an elementary grade and high school grade. They got an A in the elementary portion, an F for the high school. So think of the absurdity of these. These 7th and 8th graders got A's. Next year, the 8th grader goes 9th grader, now he's an F. Anyway, I've taken away too much of your time.
I noticed a lot of little island schools though really came good. They came out with A's. I don't know what they is. They're small and they're rural, but they came out.
Our 2 biggest schools with our most diversity and the ones that your children go to were the A's and B's. Addison got an A and Harrington got a B.
That's what they got a C.
Probably is. I'm not going to sit here and argue it here. I say yes, that's absolutely right.
I think you scored well on your SAT
by
that
end. We was really afraid it'd be the opposite way not because of your students going there, but because of the diverse special ed programs, the special programs we have there. But on the elementary grade, what they did is they figured it totally different than high school, by the way, because elementaries don't take SATs. They take achievement tests, and they're measuring it on a year's growth for the same student, which is a very fair way to measure it. They take the student in 3rd grade, look what they did in 4th grade, and I mean, I'm all for that way of measuring. That makes sense. But they also took your bottom 25% scorers, and they looked to see what kind of growth they had in the next year. So you take your poorest students, the ones that are achieving the least, and they're looking to see what did the school do with them to help them improve. And if if they show a year's growth in a year's amount of time, they give you a point for that. If they don't, they take a point away. So what that showed in those two schools, because they do have some of the more severely handicapped kids going there, that they did a good job of getting a year's growth in a year's amount of time with those population of kids. So that's one of the reasons why they scored so well, along with the fact that they showed the upper achieving kids that have proficiency in their core curriculum also scored well.
I also took a look at the kids that used to have the pass page,
Yeah.
and every one of those kids showed A-like, every single one.
Well, the irony of the whole thing is we just got visited by the state of Maine at our high school for being one of the 10 best, most improving high schools in the state of Maine, and they came and did a big write-up on us and showing all the different things we're doing that's so great, and then we get an F. And we had an elementary school actually that got the same distinction. Millbridge Elementary was studied to look at what they'd done to show such great improvement over the last 4 years of testing, and they got a C. And Cherryfield got a C. So, you know, take it for what it is.
Did I understand you to say, this is going backwards, but that this bus that you were going to buy for $93,000 because it was a handicapped bus was for one student?
You probably heard it that way, but
That's why I heard it. Did I
rephrase it.
misunderstand that? Because
It's
you
not
said
for
if
one
this particular student,
It's not for one student. It's a full-size bus that would be put on a regular run and deliver regular run of kids in the morning. But then, once it did that, because it's a handicapped bus, it would go pick up one student and bring them to their program. Then, in the afternoon, it would take that one student home before the regular end of the day run, but then it would deliver a whole run's worth of kids back. So, the reason why we don't need it, though, if Cherryfield withdraws, is because without that student in the district, we don't have the need to have a new handicap bus. We do have other handicap buses, or buses with handicap, with a chair lift.
What will happen to that student? I thought the way you described it, that you would still service the special ed handicap children in the district.
You are right.
So,
What would happen to that student?
Yes.
We're not responsible for transportation,
But Lenny,
but we
had a
are
point.
responsible for programs.
There is the possibility that someday you may have to provide transportation for one child. That's federal law.
Oh, and we do have for this one child, but luckily for us, we can combine it. We can make the bus be multiple purpose. We decided a long time ago, or someone other than me decided a long time ago, to no longer buy small handicap buses because you can't really run them any cheaper anyway. The district used to have, you probably remember seeing it, a little tiny handicap bus years ago, and they decided that it really makes more sense to buy a full-size bus with a wheelchair ramp on it and have that bus serve all kinds of purposes. It's not uncommon for that bus to go take kids to a ball game at night or, you know, to whatever, and that way you get the miles on the buses you need to be able to replace them after 10, 15 years goes by. The state makes us have a certain amount of mileage and a certain amount of years old before we replace a bus. And what we've had trouble with is getting that amount, we've got trouble getting the miles because they rust out too fast. And that's just been a recent phenomenon in the last 5, 6 years, but it's hard to get 15 years on a bus now because the whole undercarriage, the whole cross members and stuff will be gone before you get the 300,000 miles you need on the diesel bus where they'll have to replace it.
but you could replace it, you just have to pay it off.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, you wouldn't get any subsidy.
Instead of the $15 you get out of the subsidy, you'd have to pay it every.
You'd have to pay it off.
Any other questions? Thank you. you, Mr. Ramsay.
I thank you for the opportunity. I'm sorry it took so much time. I tend to be a little long-winded. Thank you. Good luck.
Other old business is heating system.
Yes, I have the guy from Main Control here. Excuse me. He just did a brief walkthrough, looked at things. It appears that at some point in time, and he thought maybe when the new boilers were put in, the old heating system, some of the controls were, do you have any hard candy? Were disconnected. Main controls used to maintain this building. Excuse me. Main controls used to take care of this building a long time ago and service the system that was in here. And he said in order to fully diagnose everything that needed to be done, then they would probably have to send somebody down to spend an entire day, which would be around $600. He was going to get a quote to me, and then could decide from there what it was that needed to be done. Not again. So that's,
He's going to send a quote.
he's supposed to send a
Okay.
quote to me.
I think we should wait for the quote. We'll go from there. PRSWDD addendum. What have they added into it now?
Well, I don't think it's a new addendum. I think if I remember correctly, you don't have a copy, I have to, when they sent the contract last time, they wanted you to sign it until 2018. And I don't believe you guys agreed to that. And that's what they've sent as an addendum. Let me look at the water.
Question is, why is there a bill for that, but not any for the one that is for the
What's your pleasure? Think we should sign that until 2018? I mean, are we going anywhere else between now and then?
What other option do we have?
Not right. The only other option I know of, unless we contracted with some outside entity to come in and curbside pickup, which I think would be tremendously expensive.
I for one, would like to see a comparison between Mac Wright and what they offer out here. We have that option now, and if we sign a contract for 18, that's not going to give us an option for quite a while.
You can still withdraw.
Is that a normal amount of time between contracts? Is that what they've been doing?
I don't know. That's when PERT goes.
Oh, yeah, right. That money's gonna change.
When they decommission or they relicense or whatever they do.
How long do we have?
Why don't we get our representative in here?
Yeah.
Have him explain it to us.
Good idea.
Our representative, Ed Van Dam.
See if they'll come to the next meeting. I'm almost positive that payment was a contract this past year. You signed it, but then they included the extra and you didn't.
Policy on building usage for nonprofit.
And I already know that you haven't, but you were going to think about, I shouldn't assume that you haven't, I was kind of guessing. You guys were gonna think about, come up with a plan on how to handle the nonprofit. You wanna continue doing it one at a time, or?
What's the discrepancy? Just how we use each individual, it should be a policy?
That's up to you guys.
Wouldn't it be difficult to have a policy? Wouldn't it be difficult to have a policy because there's always exceptions to the rule?
Well, we can keep doing it on a case-by-case basis, I guess.
And then, so people will have to wait. They need to know that they have to plan ahead and do it. Okay. That's all I need to know.
Now, the Girl Scouts, did they ever use the building? They called and asked for it, and they never
No.
used it?
No, they never, it was
But they scheduled.
too late for,
Oh,
no,
they
they never
no,
did schedule it.
they never did
No,
schedule
no, by the time they got okay, it was, well, no, it wasn't the okay. They found out that something to do with, insurance, you know, with that group or something, had nothing to do with them coming here, but they never, consent forms.
Yeah,
Consent
individual
forms,
consent
that's what it was,
forms.
yeah, consent forms.
Okay, as long as we know we need to bring it to them. Okay.
Yep. Any other old business?
Yes, I have a question. I found this in my box. It's a bill from James Wadman for professional services from 12/28/12 to 4/22/13. And it lists audit for the fiscal year ending January 31st, 2013, including checking account reconciliations to general ledger, consultations regarding consultation of accounts, bicentennial committee funds, payroll tax overpayment, carryover balances for $5,523. And then the following sentence is highlighted in bright red so I wouldn't miss it. Meet with Selectmen Ward and Look to discuss the audit and procedures within the town office, $83.75. And then to prepare for and attend Selectmen's meeting, answer questions of residents, and review audited financial statements for $534.50. Which I guess is all right. But this statement that is highlighted certainly catches my eye, but I don't see any statement here referring to Nancy and Lenny going up the day before and being charged.
I asked for Mr. Wadman to send that to me separately because we had talked about it at the Selectmen's meeting. Since it was such an issue, we would pay it, and you stated that you and Jay would take care of paying that. So that's why you have that bill and you have that amount highlighted. That was your comment at that Selectmen's meeting.
Oh, I thought I remembered that Alan said that he was going to pay it.
He did, and I didn't feel it was right for
I
Alan
was
to
gonna
pay
pay
it.
for mine.
So my mother and I paid for our own,
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
and that has been paid.
I tried to pay, believe me, she wouldn't let me.
She could pay for mine too, if she wants.
What account are we gonna take the $534 or $43, whatever it was, out of? All of them, he came here at the last selectment.
I guess before we deal with that, I have another question. Including checking account reconciliations to general ledger. We hired him to do that?
He explained the night that he was here and spoke to all of us that the treasurer had reconciled the checkbook to Trio, which was, with the previous system, all she had to do. She didn't realize that it needed to go with the general ledger. He has since discussed it with her, and it's something that's already being done. He explained that night he was here. That was something that was not explained to us when the TRIO program. We didn't know it until we took an online course in February, that was different from the Newburgh thing. It's one, and for whatever reason, it just wasn't touched on, and when we took the online course, we discovered it, but by then, from the year before, you know, that it was already in there. So it is now fixed, it's addressed, he's explained it to us, so we learned from TRIO. So that was one of the things that was part of the learning curve.
What account are we going to take the 534.40 out of? What account should that come out?
Audit report. Where you have your audits taken out of administration.
Professional services or administration?
Professional services
Is
is
it?
under
Is it
administration, but it's not the real audit. So
Administration? Administration. Any other old business? No?
Is the ball done with old business, Alan?
Yes, go ahead.
All right, well, I just got the seeds. Materials. Bookkeeping is that good, but that's it.
Yep.
Oh, I guess with that statement from Rich, I'd like to mention something for the years sitting here that was shared with me this weekend. Rich volunteered to go up and repair those 2 dugouts, and I was told it was an excellent job. I was also told that Dan was asked what else needed to be done, and he mentioned the pop-up bases that I had mentioned in the last meeting. And Rich pulled out 2 $100 bills and passed it to Dan and said that he wanted it applied for those pop-up bases. I think that we owe him
Anything for the kids, all for the kids.
good job.
I can't go without saying, Jay has helped me every step of the way. So, without his help, probably I couldn't have done it, I guess.
Have you done the bleachers?
Yep.
You started on those?
All done.
They're all done?
Yep.
Those aren't, this isn't receipts for that?
Yep.
It is?
Yep,
I
everything.
did do the whole of it though, just the
Just
Just
what
the
was
ones that
bad.
needed to be done?
Yep.
And a railing along the back?
On the back, yep. Yep,
Okay.
yep, all done.
That was part of that MMA thing.
That's where it was, I didn't know
Yeah.
where. I didn't think it come from Dan.
No, that was something to do with MMA coming
Right.
and doing that walk around.
Question, did we ever look into whether we can dip into the Little League Fund to help pay for that?
What is the Little League Fund in? Is that a CD or a savings account?
CD. I can't really remember off the top of my head. I think it's just a savings account, but because it's so small.
If it's a savings account, we can take
Yep.
whatever money is here to,
Is that what you want me to do?
right?
That would come out of the small field.
Sounds great.
Yeah, that's what's for it.
And if it's not?
I guess we'd have to take it out of buildings and grounds.
We only had one other thing, was about, what would it take to get power up there to one of those poles so that maybe they could sell concessions or, you know, plug in and we'd be moving the ball field a little ahead for like events or something. Maybe.
Have to have an electrician in Bangor Hydro. You have to set up some kind of a meter.
Right, I'll check and see what, you know, what it
Because I
is.
think when we were building those dugouts, we did have power at that pole. That pole is down in behind by the avenue there, I think.
Bangor Hydro donates a lot to things like that, you know, kids involved.
Probably wouldn't get used that much. Well, it might. Wouldn't be as expensive jar, I would think.
Possibly donate the monthly.
Do the kids from the schools use it now, like they used to?
No.
No.
Which is too bad, they should. Addison's got a horrible field.
How come they don't? They
I
always
don't know.
They always did.
Our kids go to Addison now, so we're stuck.
Well, yeah, that's true.
That, and the district always contributes $500
Well, that's what I
a
was
year.
thinking, the other, because it wasn't always just from the 12 kids, other kids did it.
If we offered it for use for games, I don't know, that might be a suggestion to
Always
offer
used to
it
put
to
a porta
school.
potty up there too, in the summer.
Yeah. I think Dan
Soccer
has that.
programs like good up there, yeah.
Any other old business?
Well, I don't know if it's old business or not, but, the trailer up on Sunnyville Road, right before Tom Worcester's across the road, not, the bus driver, the one that was burned, did the fire department burn that? No. Did they get a permit? They did.
But they, at the time, didn't say they were burning.
Burning a trailer.
A trailer.
I didn't think
They
so.
were burning slash and brush.
So can we make them clean that mess up?
I don't think we have any ordinances that.
Well, it doesn't matter. They bought a permit to burn brush and they burnt that building. You know, I mean.
Where is this in
Right up.
Before you get to County Concrete,
Okay.
Yeah.
back this way on the right-hand side. You can't miss it, it's a burning trailer.
Oh, okay, all right, that's, yeah,
Yeah, I have no idea
that.
Dean, Tabitha and Dan Beal owned
That's Steve.
the trailer. Tabitha was the one that came in to get a permit.
Well, I was at
Slash and brush.
the ball, yeah, right.
I
And,
think she extended
Tom
her slash.
and Lois stopped in and asked me about it. I had no idea what had happened. I said, well, I'll find
What
out.
are they
because
gonna
if
say?
they
You gotta wait for
gotta-
them?
Well, but, doesn't matter, they should call the fire department.
Right.
Well,
And
the
they
mess is
didn't,
all going on my land.
you know, right.
It's all
But I
going
mean,
on my land.
if they burned it under the disguise of a brush pile, and they need to clean the mess up.
Could
I
Courtney
would
do
think-
anything about that?
What's that?
Could Courtney do anything about that?
Well, I don't know, I don't know.
I think the
That's
fire
what I
chief
talked
would be
to
able
ask him
to
about.
stop that, wouldn't he?
It's not safe.
He wouldn't be able to,
Not really.
No.
Because it's kind of after the fact, and there was no call, I wasn't dispatched to respond to it.
Right.
Really, it's kind of it could be kind of a DEP thing.
Yeah.
Because the DEP sets the regulations for the release of pollutants into the environment.
Right.
Forestry enforces, has the overall burn permit authority, really, you know.
I'll
Towns
talk
have
to Courtney about it.
fire orders and such, but it could be a DEP issue more than anything right now. Because you have
Past tense.
things, you know, if you have some type of ecological failure on your property, then they can intervene.
Yeah, but can you make somebody clean up their own property? If we do, we could walk them down the streets and make lots of people clean up their property.
well, you can't burn a building like that.
If not on
If
a brush
you're
pile.
burning, if you're burning brush, you
That's
can't,
the way they messed up, they really can't do.
we can't go around burning
They're
that
gonna have to clean
building.
it up. Well, I guess they don't have to, but.
They were doing so good, they cleaned up 2 other ones out there. Somebody had along that road.
The wind was.
Yeah.
Jay, on your way out, if you pick that one up, Nancy's got out there, says in there that, basically, burning what you ain't supposed to is Class E crime,
That's right.
so.
Yeah, there was a lot there that wasn't supposed to be done. It was like the old lady next door there, we went to school, and I can't think of her name. She must have been.
She called to ask if they had a burn permit. But again, I didn't know they were burning the trailer. They wanted to borrow her water, she said.
Good point, so they might just get, and they might just end saying, you want to burn the front of the house, then how can we get
Any other old? We'll move on to new business. Any new business?
Again,
Yes. Lynette Robbins called me and asked me to stop in, which I did. And she put together this letter, May 13, 2013. Ellen Grant, Bernard Ward, J. Lutz, Selectmen of Thunder Falls. Dear Sirs, I am writing this letter on behalf of the remaining members of the Greenwood Cemetery Society of Columbia Falls. These members are Charles Robbins, Donette Robbins, Eleanor Galen, and Sarah Eastman. As you can see, we are few in numbers, and we have kept and maintained the Greenwood Cemetery for the past 20 years or more. Because there are only 4 of us, we feel that it is time to disband. I'm including with this letter a copy of our bylaws and also copies of the latest statement of our checking account and a 12-month CD at Machias Savings Bank. I am also attempting to get in contact with a person who wishes to make a donation to the Greenwood Cemetery Society. The remaining membership of this organization wish to turn this over to the town, with the understanding that all monies shall be used for the sole purpose of the upkeep of the Greenwood Cemetery on the Tippetstown Road. Please notify me if you have any questions regarding this. Sincerely, Don L. Robbins. And you have included in this the bylaws. And in the bylaws, it states, I read it quickly, that once this cemetery society disbands, it has to be turned over to the town.